Well, I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having us and inviting us to be here. Excited to be able to serve you all. I want to start off by sharing a story with you today. This is a story about our trip that our family took, and we're gonna see how it's time to fly. A lot of you have ideas for what you want your business to be. You have dreams that we're awakening here. Dreams that we're building upon, dreams that perhaps you don't know exist yet, and yet God has planted that seed deep down in your heart. We want to help to awaken those for you. But in today's story, I want to take you on a trip with my family and I up the river. We live in Mexico, in tropical Mexico. We decided to take our family out to see flamingos in the wild. I'd seen flamingos in the zoo. I'd seen them on TV, like many of you, right? But I'd never seen them in the wild. And as a home educator and a mom who loves all of those fun activities that add to my children's cultural experience, I wanted to take my kids to see these flamingos. So we chartered a fishing boat, which wasn't much more than a tin can with a motor on the back, and decided to go up the coast and up the river to go find the flamingos. And I don't know exactly what I was expecting, but it was nothing like what I saw when we rounded that corner. If you can imagine with me the blue of the water, the blue of the sky, and the green of the jungle bushes on both sides, and pink, fluffy clouds everywhere in between. It was amazing, amazing sight. And this picture that I found doesn't even do it justice, right? And just pink everywhere. And it was so out of place in that environment. And yet it was so perfectly at home. And, there was crocodiles in this river too. We were not getting out of the boat, okay? But the flamingos didn't seem to mind that. They just stood there and did what they were doing. And the closer we got to these flamingos, I expected them to flap their wings and run away, and they just stood there, kept doing what they were created to do. We got within several feet of these flamingos without any of them even caring that we were in their atmosphere. And it so impacted me that I couldn't get it out of my head when we went home. Like, I thought the trip was for the kids, but here I was, couldn't get over these flamingos. And the more I started researching, because that's what an educator does, right? The more I started researching about flamingos, the more these unique facts kept bringing up lessons to me about how, as entrepreneurs especially, but as faith-led entrepreneurs, we are so much like flamingos. A lot of us don't have a clue how cool we are. A lot of us don't realize how amazing God made us. We're just thinking we're doing what we were created to do. Or else, like somebody mentioned today, we're hiding in plain sight. We're out there doing things and hoping nobody sees me because I don't want to feel awkward. Instead of embracing the fabulous way you were made and what you can do in the ecosystem in which God has placed you. And so what I hope that you will walk away from today is that you will walk away with a new understanding of the source of your potential, a new understanding of the services that you can provide to the people God is calling you to serve, and a new awareness of the support that can be yours as you follow His leading. And so, as we dive into this today, there's 3 things that you need to get your business off the ground. Whether you're an eagle or whether you're a flamingo, they both fly. And to get us off the ground, we've got to focus in on those 3 things: the source, the service, and the support. There is a page for notes on 23 if you need a page to write on there. I've got minimal slides to share because I want you to focus in on what we're saying here. I want you to walk away saying, I know the source, I know my service, and I know where to find support. And so that story of us walking up the river was the initial. We were well into our business by now. We were 5, 6, 7 years into our business. But it became a pivotal point in our business because it allowed us to redefine the way we were looking at our source and our service and our support circles. It allowed us to have a new way of understanding who we are in business. How many of you would raise your hand and say, I'm a business owner? All right. How many of you would say, I want to be a business owner? All right. I want to present to you today another way to look at that. I am not a business owner. I've been in business for 14 years now, but I'm not a business owner. I'm the CEO of a business God has entrusted to me to steward here on earth. And when we can take a perspective that the source of my business is the God who created me, who gave me his purpose here on earth, it changes the perspective from which we get to serve. When you can understand that your source is not your clients, your source is not the next sale or the next deal. Your source is the one who created you and put you here to do this. It changes everything. Because now I'm no longer selling myself. I'm no longer selling what I can do. I'm selling what somebody bigger wants to do for you through what he's entrusted me to do. And it changes everything. It changes your confidence, it changes your outlook, it changes your energy, it changes your motivation, right? Because it's no longer about me. It's about what God wants to do through you, or it's about the transformation that can be yours through the gifts and the talents that I've been given to use on your behalf. And so when you can see God as your source, or you can see that bigger purpose as the source of what you get to do, then it also allows you to sell without it being me who needs. I don't need this sale. I need to do whatever is the next right step in this moment. I need you to have the confidence to take the next right step. And if that's with me, great. And if it's not, wonderful. We still had an amazing outcome from this conversation, right? And I'm helping either way. And so knowing that source is super, super important as we look at this. Embracing my position as a CEO of this business, the steward of this business, the manager of these resources, the time, the money, the people, all of those are resources that are not dependent upon my clients or the next deal. They're dependent on the source of where all this came from. I get to manage them and steward them for the best of everyone concerned. And it changes everything. It changed how we do business. It changed how we teach our clients to do business. And it gave everyone a different perspective and a different motivation, different outlook for their business. So if you can acknowledge the right source in your business, it will become an advantage for you that others don't have. Because you will no longer need that next client or sale. You will have the confidence to serve knowing that your provision comes from somewhere else. Dan Miller, an author we all know and love, said, look inward first. Recognize your unique God-given talents and dreams and passions. For then you can see the opportunities that align with work that matters. Flamingo stands there in the river and does what he was created to do with boldness. He recognizes his job in the ecosystem. Did you know that if a single flock of flamingos died, the entire world's ecosystems would be affected because of the job that they do to keep the balance in our ecosystem? Who's being affected because you're not confident to do what you've been called to do? Who's being affected because you're not out there with the boldness to stand there in the river regardless of the competition or the dangers? Remember the crocodiles and the tourists were there too, right? We have crocodiles and tourists in our ecosystem of the marketplace. But you're to be there boldly, courageously, doing what you were created to do. And let God handle the tourists and the crocodiles. Because if you don't, your entire world can be affected by the lack of you not doing what you're created to do. And so recognizing that source gives us incredible courage and boldness. The second thing is we've got to recognize that we have the right service. And there's 3 parts to this point. And this first one is recognizing your core values. And now, one of the things that shifted for us when we started looking at our core values in our service is that we recognized that we have 3 primary core values, speaking for myself and our brand, my husband and I. We value truth, we value community, we value legacy above everything else. And there can be hundreds and hundreds of different core values you can choose from. There's no right or wrong. The important thing is that you know what you value and that you use that as a lens through which all of your business decisions get run. And when we recognize that, truth, we want to bring people back to truth, right? Who is your God? Who put you here? What is his purpose for you? Well, how does that work out in business, right? We were covering that part. But then when we looked at legacy, we're creating courses that will outlive us. We're creating books that will outlive us. We're impacting people who can take that message and teach it to other people. We got that covered. But in the area of community, which was really, really important to us, is we had been in Mexico for several years now and very much isolated from other business owners, isolated from family, isolated from, just from the geographical distance from people. Community was really important to us. And we realized that piece was missing in our programs. And so 4 years ago, we took all of our programs apart and rebuilt them in part to incorporate this piece of community. Because just like the entire world is impacted if a flock of flamingos dies off, a single flamingo, if isolated, will also die because he doesn't have the protection and the encouragement and the fellowship of the others in the flamboyance, the group of flamingos. So community is huge, especially for entrepreneurs. And so we built that back into our programs, and we created our group coaching program that has a community aspect, and we built community into a mastermind and having regular retreats as well as in-person retreats, right? How do we build that element of community back in so that nobody is isolated, so that nobody can just go off on their own without getting noticed and be left to die, for lack of a better term, on their own? We need community in order to survive as a flamingo and as entrepreneurs, right? And so whatever your core values are, is it faith? Is it truth? Is it integrity? Is it, there's any number of them. You need a list, go do a Google search. But if you don't know what your core values are, I want to encourage you to study this out and search for it and say, what do I value above other things? Maybe it's 2, maybe it's 3, maybe it's 6, I don't know. There's no right or wrong there, but you do need to know what you stand for so you don't fall for anything, right? And so you know what you stand against. And then once you have that, you can run everything that you do, including your services, through those elements of core values and say, does what I offer align with those core values? And it makes your decisions much easier. Another example of this, a client of ours, Jennifer, was asked to do some VA work for someone who began to dabble into the dark arts. And she came to me and she's like, everybody's telling me I need to just, shut my mouth and keep going and keep doing this work for her, but I don't really feel right about it in my spirit. And I was like, well, then you need to listen to the spirit, right? She's like, it doesn't align with my faith. I was like, then I am 100% for you stepping out on your own and leaving that client. And she did. And she ended up doing it against everyone else's advice. And the Lord blessed her business, and it has grown incredibly since that. But if she hadn't have had the value, this is what I stand for and stand against, she would never have been able to make that decision, right? And so with your business, what are your core values, and are they a lens through which you create your services and make business decisions? If you want to know more about this, we have a free class called the Business Reset. You can sign up for free, flamingobizreset.com, where we go deeper into this in a 3-part video series. It's one of our more popular classes, and we're happy to have that offered to you all if you want to take advantage of that. But the second thing is the right services. What transformation do you provide? What is the outcome of your business offering? So when we think about, what do you offer your people? A lot of people are like, well, I've got an online class, or I've got a mastermind, or I build websites for new entrepreneurs. Well, that's the stuff. That's what we call the deliverables. What's the transformation? What's the outcome, right? How do you want them to walk away from you differently because they read your book, or because you built their website, or because they took your class? How is their life going to be different? And a lot of people say, well, it's hard for me to describe it. But we have to describe it. Because people don't know that they want your stuff until they know what your stuff will do for them. People don't know if they want your stuff until they know what your stuff will do for them, right? So think about a commercial, right? The commercials are very visual. A 30-second commercial with music, you rarely hear words at all. It's all pictures of how their life is different because they had that one piece of chewing gum, right? I mean, you've seen them, right? The teenage boy wants to get the girl, and so what's he do? His friend gives him a piece of gum before he walks over to say something to her, and you see them walking off screen together, right? Like his whole life changed because of that one. The gum was the stuff. The outcome he wanted was the girl, right? So what's the transformation? What's the outcome people get when they work with you? How is their life different? Do they wake up happier? Are their family relationships better? Do they find they get to take time off from work? Do they get more clients than they ever dreamed they could because their website's so amazing? Like, what's the transformation? How is their life affected? If you can hone in on that right transformation, then that is key for you growing that business and getting it off the ground. The stuff, how it happens, none of us care how many classes we have to take if we get the life change we want. Does that make sense? All right, so I've done a lot of talking to this point. I want to give you 2 minutes now to talk to each other. And I think we've got enough at each table for you to pair up in twos. I'm going to give you 1 minute each to tell your person, your partner, what the transformation of your business does. All right? And then I'm going to call time, and you're going to switch, and person 2 will go. All right? What is the transformation of your business? So 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. Everybody got a partner? All right, here we go. Person 1, you're on. Did you feel good about being able to express your transformation? Yeah? Awesome. Wonderful. When you think about it like the video, like the commercial, a lot of times that can help for you to express it better because you're able to tell them what it looks like, right? Sometimes it's hard to say your transformation is X, Y, Z, right? But it looks like peace, or it looks like a family dinner with no fighting, or it looks like more clients coming through your funnel, right? Then it's easier for them to see it as if it were on a video. And think about, like, if I had to use a video and no words to describe this, what would that look like? And a lot of times that helps for you to follow through. But that transformation is key in knowing you've got the right service to offer to your people, knowing how to language that for your people is really key. And knowing how to language it in words that they understand, too. That's the other thing. A lot of us are experts. And a lot of us use language experts would use because we're experts. We took the classes, we did the time, we know the language. But your people may not know that, right? For instance, I had a client just this last week who wants to help people create websites. And she was using the word platform. I want to help new entrepreneurs create a platform for their business. I was like, are they saying that they need a platform? Or are they just thinking to themselves, like, I might need a website, I don't know, right? Like, we need to be sure that we're using the language that our right fit person is using so that we can connect with them. At our table at lunch, we had a conversation about translation and interpreting. We were talking about between languages, right? And how sometimes you can say something, but if you're not using the right terms, it gets lost in the translation. It doesn't make any sense. Even in English, sometimes we get lost in the translation of those terms. So be sure that you're using language not to speak down to your people. You don't ever want them to feel like you're speaking down to them, but you do want to use simple language, especially when you're talking about the transformation. And if you ever have a choice between clear or clever, go for clear. Okay? It can be cutesy and maybe nobody has that URL yet, but does it accurately say what you're providing? You want to be as clear as possible every single time. The third thing under the right service is what makes you different. What makes you different? Some people call this your unique selling position. I call it your flamingo advantage. All right? Flamingos are different. First off, we think of their color. Do you know how they get their color? It's from what they eat. Their diet of crustaceans and other organisms down in the mud in the river gives them their color. The flamingos that are more brightly colored have found better food. How many of you can relate to that? The more that we feed ourselves good stuff, the more obvious it is that we have good stuff. The more you put yourself in personal development, the more you feed yourself on good mindset stuff, the more you feed yourself on solid, positive thinking, right? All of that, the more what we feed ourselves comes out, just like a flamingo's color. Apart from the flamingo's unique color, there are other things that set them apart, like the distances that they can fly. They can fly up to 450 miles at a time. 450 miles at a time, but they can't do it alone. It has to be in a group, because in a group they take turns being in front and taking the brunt of the wind. And as they tire, they move to the back and another one moves to the front, right? We'll get to that in a second and come back to that piece, but what makes you different? One of the things that makes me different as a business coach is that I'm faith-based, and I don't mind leading with that. I'm not obnoxious with it. I don't hit people over the head with it. But everything I teach comes back to the truth of God's word and a biblical principle. And there's not many people out there teaching business that way right now. I can do that because I've lived it. I was someone who lived off of donation support to do ministry. I never knew from one day to the next how much money we'd have next week. I didn't know who was going to give or who wasn't going to give. Completely dependent on the whims of other people's givings. And God transitioned us into business. And I had to get over a lot of the mindset and a lot of the false beliefs that I'd been taught around you can't charge, it's the ministry. Or if you have a gift, you have to use it for free if it's for God, right? A lot of those false beliefs that I'd grown up with, either in a culture of religion or it had been taught to me as truth when it's not in Scripture. And I had to come back to finding the truth. And so everything that I teach now is based on truth. And I don't want you to take it because I said it. I want you to go back to God's word and find out what he says, right? And that sets me apart. It makes me different. There's lots of others out there who are business coaches and Christians, but they don't bring their faith into their business. And I don't believe you can separate your faith from your business. Amen. Flamingo can't decide to go be purple today because I'm tired of pink, right? He doesn't get up and be a flamingo on Sunday and a hornbill on Monday. We have to be what we are. We have to let what is on the inside show on the outside and be authentic, even with the things that we believe. And that will set you apart. Someone who keeps their word is set apart from others in the industry. Someone who does things with excellence is set apart from others in the industry. It shows, and it will help to set you apart. Another thing people think of is branding. And obviously the flamingos kind of chose us because after we went on that river trip, I wrote a book about flamingos, and then I wrote another one, and suddenly I'm the flamingo lady, right? But we embraced it because it is memorable and it does stand out, and it became something that became an icon for our brand. You do need to embrace who you are and let your colors show. Some people say that my flower is a branding thing. It's not. The flower is about Katie having permission to be Katie today. Because in the ministry that we were in our first years in ministry, we were taught that anything that drew attention to us drew away from the mission we were there to do. No loud colors, no jewelry, no nail polish, right? Don't do anything to draw away from the gospel. And so I stuffed all of the fun parts of Katie down into my long floor-length skirts, and I complied. Until, in another ministry years later, I grabbed my daughter's headband so I could throw it in my hair and turn on the camera because I was late to teach a class. And somebody's like, "Oh, I love your flower." I didn't think anything about it. But next week, they're like, "Where's your flower? That was really cute. You should wear that more often." And so I started wearing it more often. And as I wore the flower, I started feeling God speak to my spirit. I love how you feel when you wear the flower. I love the way you show up different when you wear the flower. I love that you're embracing the way I made you to love color, to love fun. And that's okay, because it's going to attract the people that I want to attract to you and repel the people who don't need you. And whatever it is in your life, it may not be a flower, it may not be a flamingo, but there is something about you and the way you do what you do, the way you show up as you, the way you fully embrace the life and the purpose that God has given you, that is your flower, that makes you unique. Another fun fact about the flamingo is that you can't really tell them apart when you look at them. Even biologists have to do more than just a cursory glance to tell if they're male or female. They look alike, thousands of them sometimes in a single flamboyance. Do you know how they tell each other apart? Every bird has a unique voice. Every single one of them has a unique voice. And so they can look just like everyone else. But the mates and the children and the friends in their small flock of the big flock can recognize them by their voice. You can look just like the thousands of other people in your niche doing what you do. But there's somebody who's listening for your voice. You were created unique on purpose because somebody needs your message. Your message matters, not the other birds. Your message. And if you don't use that voice to get it out there, like Dan was talking in point number 3 this morning about all the different ways to get your voice out in all these different platforms, those are gifts to you to get your voice out there. I have people that come to me like, "Oh, I could never do that. There's so many people out there. The market's saturated. They don't need somebody else to do that thing." I say, no. If you're still here, someone still needs what you have to say. And you can be doing exactly what everybody else is doing. That's proof of market. Like, that's a good thing. It will sell if there's other people doing it. But you need to recognize that you have a unique way of doing it. Your life experience, your education, your background, your learning style, your teaching style, all of that makes you you. And only you can do what you do like you do. Your unique voice. This is your flamingo advantage. This is what you get to stand up and boldly leverage, is this is me. This is me. And this is what God has gifted me to do for you. Right? Because it's not about me and my business. It's about what He wants to do for other people through me. That's why I'm still here. And that's why you're still here. And so with your service, thinking about those 3 things, your core values, the transformation, and your unique flamingo advantage. And of course, there's more to that in the book. I don't have them with me, but they're available online or wherever books are sold. Would love to get a copy for you if you want one. So the last thing, though, is the right support. This is the 3rd and final thing you need to fly. If you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, you go together. And there's a million people that this has been attributed to, so I didn't put an attribution there. Some say it's an African proverb, some say it's, the latest, greatest singer out there. But it's true. If you want to go far, you go together. A flamingo can't fly 450 miles in one stretch by himself. He's got to have the others in the flock flying with him. He's got to be surrounded by the others. He's got to be surrounded by his flamboyance if he wants to survive in his environment. It gives him protection. It gives them fellowship. It gives them that community that they need to be able to thrive. And you and I as entrepreneurs need that too. We need the encouragement. We need someone to point us to the right food sources. We need somebody to point us to the right resources. We need the encouragement. We need the kick in the pants when we don't feel like doing it today. And we need somebody else that we can teach. Because if all we do is absorb, we explode. So we need those that are both further ahead and further behind in our communities to be able to do what we were called to do. Only you can do the work that you've been called to do, but you don't have to do it alone. And this is where, when we first started out in business, the very first program I ever joined was Michael Hyatt's Platform University. The very first time he offered it, I was one of the first students that signed up in Mexico because I had no one to teach me business. No one to teach me what I needed to know to get this business off the ground that I knew God was calling us to do. And I joined that program and I learned a ton, but I didn't have community. And I couldn't find community. Online communities didn't exist back then. And so God led us to create a community. I'm one of those people. If I can't find what I need, I'll make it myself, right? But in God's guidance, we created a community. I ended up being the leader. Surprise, surprise. And as I grew, the group grew. And it became something that we now offer. It's evolved many, many times over. But that initial group of like-minded people who are all in business, so I could bounce ideas off of. So what's working for you? What's working for you? What book have you read recently that's helped you? Where do I go to find this? What are you using for that, right? When I was just stuck, it was a group, and my group was faith-based, so that, those days that we just I just need prayer. I'm really fighting something today. I need some prayer, or this is going on, or that. And it became a group where we got to do life and business together and really got to grow together. And as I grew and outgrew that group, it became a group that I mentored. And then I had to find myself another group, which led me to some other business groups, eventually led me to Dan's mastermind, right? Again, surrounding myself on purpose, and most of the time intentionally paying for, investing in my own growth because I knew I needed that to stay healthy, right? There's a saying out there that says if they don't pay attention. And I believe that that's also true for our communities. We have to be invested. And it has to cost us something to the point that we're motivated and committed enough to stay there and to stay plugged in and to stay committed to that group. And if you don't have that, you need to find one before you leave here this weekend, right? The Eagles, I know the 48 days group is great, the mastermind is great, but find a group where you can plug in and get what you need, both spiritually, business-wise, emotionally. All of those are important. And if it's not all in one, then find 3 groups, right? Because you need that support if you're going to continue to grow. I believe more than anything that has been one of the biggest factors in our growth. When we started with $5 in the bank, it was the end of the month. We didn't know how much was coming in the next month. We were in the midst of a messy ministry change. We said, we looked at each other and said, I think God's leading us to start a business. Well, that's crazy. We got $5 left. And yet, God did it. And that little business impacted an entire marketplace in the Spanish homeschool world, created a curriculum that didn't exist yet for the Spanish world, pioneered that. We hosted the first online trainings for Spanish-speaking home educators that ever happened. Went on to speak at their conferences and annual events all across Mexico that now broadcast around the world. And then took what we learned and were able to teach other people how to do it too. And the people who said, how could you start a business if you're in ministry? How are you going to pay for that? We had no savings. We had no credit cards. We didn't even have a Mexico work visa. How are you going to do that? I don't know, but God does. And once we recognized God as the source, he helped us find the right service, and he brought along the right support. That business is now, to his glory, multiple six-figure business. Now we can teach our kids how to do business. Now we can go across the world and teach other people how to do business. Now we can take these trainings virtually. The internet is amazing, you guys. You have that tool at your fingertips. Like, use it. It's amazing how to reach people all across the world. How to connect with people all across the world for the support. There were COVID years, we didn't leave Mexico for 2 years. We hardly left the house for 2 years. Mexico was locked down a lot longer than we were here. Our kids didn't see the inside of a grocery store for 2.5 years because they weren't allowed in with the adult, right? Like, that's how crazy it was. If we had not been plugged in to our online community, we wouldn't have survived. You've got to be plugged in. And if you don't have it, you have to be intentional to look for it, because only you can do the work God's called you to, but you don't have to do it alone. And so with those things, I want to encourage you that it's time to fly. Ecclesiastes 2:24 says, there's nothing better for a man than that he should eat and drink and find enjoyment in his work. And if you have a work that you enjoy, stop making excuses. You know where your source comes from. You've got what you need, even in this room here, to take your next step. It's time for you to fly. Choose to be an eagle, choose to be a flamingo, but you gotta fly. You gotta do what you were created to do. And it's time that we do it without apology, and without worrying about what the tourists and onlookers are gonna say, and without worrying about what dangers might be out there. You can stand boldly in the color that God has given you, with the gifts and the talents and the uniqueness and the quirks and the education that he's given you. Only you have your vision. Only you can raise those wings. But it's time to fly.